Hello everyone, Tristan here again with another longsword review. Today, however, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to be comparing two very similar swords, the Albion Alexandria and the Albion Principe. Both of these are relatively new to the Albion Next Generation line, and have become extremely popular in the HEMA scene in recent years, especially among practitioners who incorporate test cutting into their longsword training. And, seeing as I've got one of each in my studio right now, I wanted to talk about the differences, both aesthetic and functional, between them. First, let's talk about the blade, since that's the common denominator for both. The blade type is an Oakeshott Type 18C for anyone keeping track of these sorts of things. Essentially what we've got is a broad flattened diamond that tapers to a point from a very wide base. Inspiration for the blade comes from various swords in the Alexandria arsenal, which can be dated to the early 1400s thanks to the Arabic inscriptions on them. A particular favorite of mine is very close to home at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The blade on that piece is 34 1/8 inches, just a quarter inch less than the Albion model. There's also a nice piece in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is a little smaller at 31 3/4 inches long, but seems to be of a very similar proportion. It's easy to see that this type of blade makes for a very formidable but nimble hewing weapon, and Peter Johnson's research and design work has certainly brought these features to the Albion line. I've spoken about the Alexandria in a previous longsword review video, but it bears reiteration that I do not consider these swords the best for beginning practitioners, only because they're so good at cutting that user errors can sometimes be mitigated, thus robbing the student of a more fundamental feedback of their technique. However, for intermediate and advanced practitioners, I cannot recommend these swords enough. Now, let's take a look at some of the differences. The crossguard of the Alexandria is of hexagonal section with upturned terminals, not unlike the pieces in the Met and the PMA. It gently swells towards a central rib, which has been crisply executed, but, I should point out, is not so sharp as to be uncomfortable. This guard style is apparently very common among medieval Italian cutlers, and you'll see a similar shape on the Brescia Spadona as well. On the Principe, we've got, as Mr. Johnson has described, a much more flamboyant style of crossguard with flared rounded terminals. This has been inspired by swords in the so-called Castillon group found in the River Dordogne. These swords may have ended up in the river following a barge accident during the 100 Years' War, either an English supply line or as French battlefield loot. Either way, the style is appropriate, as it's also from the early to mid-1400s. There's a beautiful example of one of these swords in the Wallace collection in London, and an interesting feature on that piece that was carried over to the Principe is the decorative protrusion at the center, kind of a stylized acanthus leaf. While very pretty, practitioners may want to consider their preferences for thumb placement. Certain techniques in the Germanic system, for example, require reprofiling the sword in the hands. If you prefer to thumb the crossguard itself, this feature is of no consequence and may even provide more purchase. However, if you, like me, prefer to thumb the blade itself, perhaps the Alexandria's simpler guard would be a better choice. Speaking of other minor differences that may speak to certain preferences, the handles are of different cross-section. While that of the Principe is mostly oval section, swelling in the middle and flattening upwards towards the cross, the Alexandria has a handle that is hexagonal. My preference is for the hexagonal, but both are comfortable and neither makes indexing edge alignment difficult. The difference in relative lengths of grippable area, however, is much larger. The handles themselves only vary by a ½ inch. The Alexandria's handle is 7 inches, and the Principe's is 7½ inches. However, the styles of pommel make a big difference. Because the Alexandria has a wheel pommel, that 7 inches is pretty much all you get. However, the Principe's fishtail pommel affords nearly 9½ inches of space to place your hands. So, if you've got large hands, or just don't like how wheel pommels feel, the Principe is really the better choice. But the one downside to those few extra inches is that you're gaining a bit more mass overall. The 46 inches of the Principe weigh in at 3 pounds 15 ounces, while the 43 3/4 inch Alexandria weighs only 3 pounds 11. Well, that's it for now. I have to say that I love both of these swords, and wouldn't mind having one of each myself. But I hope this was helpful to those of you who, like me, have been drooling over these swords and were undecided about which one was best for you. I do intend to do more comparative reviews like this in the future, so if you liked it, please let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, and of course, consider joining our Patreon network. As always, thanks for watching.